Hey everyone, Greta here. Today we are going to talk about the half chaturanga. So what exactly is the half chaturanga? It's half of the full, right? So it's very, direct translation, self-explanatory. Especially when people, yoga is getting more and more popular, social media and everything, COVID, everything's really making yoga even more popular than it's always been. More people, because they are introduced to yoga, they see all these really fancy arm balance and inversions, then they want to do them. But then all those really fancy and complex shapes start from the basics. So I thought it would be good to cover the basics today. Chaturanga is one of the more foundational poses. I would call it foundation simply because it's not very complex. It's hard to do. It's actually very challenging to do, but the look of it is easy enough for people to understand. It's simple, okay? So that is why it's called the foundation or the basics. So the full chaturanga is kind of like a push-up with the elbows, or actually a plank with the bent elbows. So the spine, the body is relatively flat. But I noticed that whenever we do a half chaturanga, a new shape or a completely different shape would be formed. You might be wondering, what are you talking about? I'm talking about this one. So start from plank, right? Okay, so let's do a half chaturanga, knees on the floor. Okay, lower into half. This is not a half chaturanga. Okay, let's go back. So in the beginning of the video, I said half chaturanga is half of the full, right? So if you do full chaturanga like this, then your half will be like this, right? But you don't do your half, then why would you do the half like this? Makes sense? This is a completely different shape. It's an awesome shape. Okay, you work on the complete reverse of what a chaturanga would want you to work on. So it's basically cat-cow. Okay, this is cow, just like this, except your elbows are bent. But for chaturanga, we want this. So when you do a half chaturanga, just be more aware of the shape of the spine. It's completely different than the knees, chest, chin. The knees, chest, chin helps you with back bending. Chaturanga is the opposite. It doesn't help with the back bend at all. So what you want to do is, when you do a half chaturanga, just think of cat. How you do cat? Like that, right? So it should keep a relatively similar shape. From here, from plank, knees on the floor, okay, check the shoulders. They want to go back a bit instead of jamming into the ears, okay? And then when you bend the elbows, just notice the back pockets are pointing down towards your knees instead of up to the sky, hence cat. And then bend the elbows. Okay, they don't have to go super low. Just make sure that you can still maintain that spreading of the upper back. Okay, you don't want to go all the way here. So from here, go down. That's half. Okay, then you can go all the way down and then do a back bend. Half chaturanga, especially when you're doing in a flow, in a vinyasa speed, is actually a lot more challenging than a full chaturanga because you have to be super mindful of the smaller details in the body. For a full chaturanga, it's actually easier because the transition is more smooth. And if you're lifting the legs up, you can actually compromise the shape a little bit more without knowing. Whereas if you do half, there's no way to compromise. Every single detail would be magnified instantly. So if you're wondering, what am I talking about? Here it is. So let's say if I do a plank and then a full chaturanga. So down dog, plank, and then you just lower down, right? So the transition is actually very direct. Straight arm, bend arm, right? Okay, of course there are other details as well, but then in general, you don't have to deal with as much. Yeah, but for half, down dog, plank, from plank, knees on the floor, typically or very easily, your tailbone would go up. So from here, you have to be mindful. Knees down. Keep the back pockets pointing down. Then you come down. So it's usually the tilting of the pelvis that tends to kind of control everything or affect everything. So when you're in plank, once your knees drop, if your tailbone or the back pocket start to go up to the sky, when you bend the elbows, there's no way to keep the upper back spread. You will collapse into the upper back. So that is why it is a lot more challenging to do a half chaturanga. It's because of the tilting of the pelvis. And no, I'm not saying full chaturanga is easier. It is very, very hard as well. But it's just because of the transition from a plank. If you lower down, as I just demoed, from a plank, if you just lower down, the transition is easier. So the mind has less things to deal with. And the chances of, tilting the hips, tilting the pelvis would be less. So the next time when you're doing a vinyasa, when you are wanting to do a half chaturanga, just be mindful of the position of the pelvis. That's it for my sharing for today. Hope it helps. Take it easy. Bye bye.